Please rise. Superior Court for the State of Washington, County of King is now in session. The Honorable Jeffrey Ramsdale presiding.
And good afternoon, folks. Please be seated. Thank you. And go ahead, Mr. O'Toole, with the caption.
Thank you. This is the matter of the State of Washington versus Joseph McEnroe. Case number 071-08716-4 Seattle. Mr. McEnroe is present this afternoon in court with his counsel. My name is Scott O'Toole, and along with Michelle Morales, we appear on behalf of the state. Thank you.
All right, and thank you, counsel. Well, as you all know from being assembled here this afternoon, we have word from the jury that they have indeed reached a verdict on this matter. Before we invite them in to announce that verdict, I want to put on the record that from my perspective, both parties, the state and the defense, were very well represented in this case. Both had ample opportunity to present their respective positions. The jury has been deliberating for literally days on this matter. Whatever the verdict is, I think it should be given respect, and I would ask that those in attendance please refrain from any emotional responses to whatever the verdict might be. I think the jury is entitled to that, so thank you for your consideration. And with that, I think we're ready to invite the jury in. Mr. O'Toole?
Is it the court's practice, will the court go back and meet with the jurors afterwards?
I was planning on doing that, but not to discuss any matters relevant to the case because there may be post-trial motions and so forth. And I was going to tell you this later, but I may as well tell you now. The jury will go through a debriefing process immediately afterwards. That will take about 2 hours. We can make the jurors that remain available to you to chat with at that point in time. Some have already alerted us to the fact that they would like to talk to the attorneys, but they can't stick around till after 4:30 or so. So we're going to invite them to come back at 9 o'clock tomorrow and make them available to you then. So, and I don't know if you have any other questions relevant to that issue.
That's exactly what I was going to ask, whether the jurors would be made available to the attorneys.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't anticipate them being available before, say, 4:30 or so this afternoon?
My understanding is the debriefing process will take about 2 hours, so I'm thinking they'll be done at about 4:30. Some of them may just be too exhausted to go through the interview process with you guys and may choose to come back at 9 o'clock. But in any event, we'll email you as soon as they're done with that debriefing process so you have an opportunity to chat with those that want to remain. Okay? Anything from the defense, Mr. Presti or Mr. Hamaji?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Well, thank you very much, folks. We'll invite the jury in and hear what they have to tell us. Good luck to everyone. And I should double check. Can you all hear me fine in the back row? Okay, thank you very much.
Please rise for the jury. Watch your step, folks.
And good afternoon, folks. Please be seated. We'll Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my understanding that the jury has reached a verdict in this matter. And if I could ask the foreperson to identify themselves. It's juror number 8, Ms. Morella, right? Has the jury indeed reached a verdict, Ms. Morella?
We have.
And you've concluded your deliberations?
We have.
Okay. If you could please give the verdict form to Kenya. Thank you very much, ma'am. All right. The verdict form reads as follows. Question: having in mind the crimes of which Joseph McEnroe has been found guilty, are you convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that there are not sufficient mitigating circumstances to merit leniency? The answer that is checked says no unanimous agreement, in which case Joseph McEnroe shall be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release or parole. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, what I have to do is what we call poll the jury. So what I need to do is ask each and every one of you 2 different questions. Number 1, whether this is your own individual verdict, that the jury is unable to reach a unanimous decision. And number 2, whether you believe that that is the verdict of the jury as a whole, that the jury agrees that it cannot reach a unanimous decision. So first, juror number 1, Ms. O'Connell. Is that your own individual verdict, that being that the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict? I'm sorry?
No.
No. Okay. Juror number, let me ask you a second question. Is that the verdict of the jury as a whole, that the jury as a whole could not reach a unanimous verdict?
No.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to excuse you all to the jury room for a moment. Please don't continue your deliberations, and we will get back to you shortly. Okay? Thank you very much, folks. And please be seated. Thank you. Well, counsel, I'm going to need a little bit of direction. In the normal course, under these circumstances, we would instruct the jury to continue with its deliberations in an effort to reach a unanimous verdict. But in this kind of circumstance where a non-unanimous verdict is indeed a valid verdict, the court is loath to instruct the jury to continue to deliberate with an effort towards reaching a unanimous verdict, because that would appear to be coercing unanimity where no unanimity is required. So, Mr. O'Toole, what guidance could you give the court as to how you think we should proceed?
I don't know if you want to respond to that.
That's what I'm wondering. Ken, you want to let him know we'll be back with them shortly? Thank you. Hang on 1 second. Let me hear from Mr. O'Toole first. Mr. O'Toole, go ahead, sir.
Your Honor, I don't think you, I do think that you'll want to have them, if the circumstances as we think it currently is based, I don't know what the buzzer is about, but if the circumstance is as we currently believe it to be, I do think it's proper for the court to instruct the jurors to resume the deliberations, period. Although in the ordinary course, you would instruct them to resume with an eye towards reaching a unanimous verdict. Here, you would instruct them, what you're instructing them essentially is to go back and to agree on whatever the result is, which could be non-unanimity. So the state's position would be is to have them go back to continue the deliberations until they can answer those questions in a way that it follows the court's instructions without you telling them that they should have an eye towards reaching a unanimous verdict.
Well, in the normal course, we would ask them if they could reach unanimity within a reasonable period of time. Obviously, that's not an appropriate instruction to give them under these circumstances.
Or you could ask them whether they could reach a verdict within a reasonable period of time.
Either one of you. Go ahead, Mr.
They've
Presky.
reached a verdict. Any of the outcomes on the verdict form are valid verdicts. Yes, no, maybe. Or yes, no, or no unanimous agreement. If they've got no unanimous agreement, they've got no unanimous agreement. That is a verdict. Any instruction for them to continue would be improper because it would suggest that there's some preference for unanimity, and there is no such preference in the law.
Okay. Thank you.
If I mind, then it would make polling the jury a pointless exercise. If that were the theory under which the law operated, I think this court instructing the jury to simply return to their deliberations so that they can answer the question on the jury verdict form is appropriate because it leaves open all of the options.
Your Honor, I guess I would question whether polling is even required. If they do not have a unanimous verdict, then they do not have a unanimous verdict, and I think that settles the question. They can answer questions individually later or not, as they see fit.
I know of no case where this has come up, in the state of Washington at least.
Should we be at all concerned about the buzzer?
It depends. I think what we're going to do, counsel, because I don't know of a more elegant way out of this conundrum, is I'm going to bring them in again. I'm going to complete the polling of them, and that may give me some ideas to what the appropriate protocol would be at this point. Because I'm not sure whether or not juror number one completely understood the question, for one thing, because that happens on occasion as well. So let me get the jury back out here and continue the polling process. All right? So Kenya, if you'd invite them back, please.
Please rise for the jury. Thank you.
And welcome back, folks. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go through this polling process again, and I want to make sure everyone understands the question that I'm asking, because it is a little bit awkward. The verdict form says that the jury was unable to reach a unanimous agreement, okay? Every one of you should have a sense of whether or not you're in agreement that the jury had completed its deliberations and was unable to reach a unanimous decision. So the first question is whether you're in agreement that the jury has exhausted its efforts to reach unanimity. The second question is whether you believe that your fellow jurors are of the same mind as you are on that question. Okay, and I hope that makes it a little bit easier to understand. So juror number one, let's start over again, Ms. O'Connell, right? First question is, are you in agreement? Is it your personal opinion that the jury has exhausted its efforts to reach a unanimous agreement on this matter? You're in agreement that you've exhausted your efforts. And do you believe that that's the opinion of your fellow jurors as well? That you've exhausted those efforts? Okay, thank you. Juror number two, Ms. Lopez. With regard to the first question, is it your personal belief that the jury has exhausted its efforts to reach unanimity?
Yes.
And is it your belief that that's the verdict of the jury as a whole, that you've exhausted those efforts?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Juror number 3, Ms. Hunt, is it your personal belief that the jury has exhausted its efforts to reach unanimity?
Yes.
And is it your personal belief that your fellow jurors are in agreement with that determination?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Juror number 4, Ms. McCoy, is it your personal belief that the jury has exhausted its efforts to reach unanimity on this case?
Yes.
And is it your belief that your other jurors are in agreement with that opinion? Okay. Juror number 5, Ms. Young, is it your personal belief that the jury has exhausted its efforts to reach unanimity on this matter?
Yes.
And is it your belief that your fellow jurors agree with that position?
Yes.
Okay. Juror number 6, Mr. Stewart, is it your personal belief that the jury has exhausted its efforts to reach unanimity on this matter?
Yes.
And is it your personal belief that the jury as a whole agrees with that?
Yes.
Okay. Juror number 8, Ms. Morello, is it your personal belief that the jury has exhausted its efforts to reach unanimity?
Yes.
And is it your belief that your fellow jurors agree with that?
Yes.
Juror number 9, Mr. Hodge, is it your personal belief that the jury has exhausted its efforts to reach unanimity on this matter?
Yes.
And is it your belief that the other jurors are in agreement with that?
Yes.
Juror number 11, Mr. Amundson, is it your personal belief that the jury has exhausted its efforts to reach unanimity?
Yes.
And is it also your personal belief that the other jurors agree with that?
Yes.
Juror number 13, Ms. Curran, is it your personal belief that the jury has exhausted its efforts to reach unanimity?
Yes.
And is it your belief that the rest of the jurors agree with that?
Yes.
Juror number 14, Mr. Ballot, is it your personal belief that the jury has exhausted its efforts to reach unanimity?
Yes.
And is it also your belief that the other jurors agree with that?
Yes.
And lastly, Ms. Broback, Juror 15, is it your personal belief that the jury has exhausted its efforts to reach unanimity? And is it also your belief that the rest of the jurors agree with that? All right, thank you. Well, the verdict appearing to be in order, it will be received and filed by the court. Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes your duties as jurors in this matter. And as you may recall from many months ago, we originally summoned 3,000 individuals to be potential jurors in this matter. We had questionnaires filled out by over 600 individuals who were potential jurors, and after that, we interviewed over 400 people individually, and then we finally got to the 12 of you. And despite the horrific nature of the crimes, despite the gravity of the decision that you knew you might be called upon to make, and despite the impact of this service on your personal lives, you all stepped forward to perform your civic duty and shoulder that heavy burden. And you should be proud of yourselves and each other. So now that your jury service is concluded, you're released from all those restrictions I've been telling you for months. You're free to do any research on this case that you want to. You're free to research the law. You're free to discuss your experiences as jurors with anyone you want to. But I also want to make it clear to you that you're under no obligation to talk to anybody at all if you don't want to. So please keep that in mind. I'm going to excuse you to the jury room one more time, and Kenya will be back there momentarily to give you some additional information about the debriefing process. Now, although your service is technically completed, I'm going to ask you all to remain for a couple of minutes so that I can personally thank you for your service back in the jury room. I want to alert you that I cannot talk to you about the case itself because there may be post-trial matters that I have to address. Nonetheless, I would appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all. Again, thank you very much for your extraordinary service and for your commitment to the rule of law. I'm going to excuse you to the jury room, and I'll be back there momentarily. Thank you again, folks. Appreciate it.